Okay, so what have we learned today? Let's do a quick recap. Yes? Oh, OU has zero internal funding for research. Yes, that is sadly true. But that makes us normal, by the way. How many of you at your institution, it's normal for a faculty member to get a significant amount of internal research funding from the institution? No, on an annual basis, year by year. I'm not including startup. Nobody?
We have some, they're not massive, but they're,
Well, okay, so I'm not talking about, 5 of them get it. I mean, it's normal for most of them to get it.
Oh, not folks.
Right. So, in this state, I'm aware of one such institution, but it's not academic. It's a nonprofit research institution. And there it's normal to get internal funds. So that nonprofit research institution was founded by a rich energy baron, I guess you would say. So it has a sizable endowment. So, good. What else did we learn? To go to the cloud. I think for many of our institutions today, it's a tougher case for a lot of, by no means all, but a lot of the research computing to go to the cloud. Particularly, there are a couple of things that occur to me about this that I've thought about in the past. One of them obviously is the differential in price per unit of computing. And the differential is sufficient that if your utilization on the resources you have, your institution has, is high enough, and that might be anywhere from, in the case of sort of non-tightly coupled or shared memory computing, small parallelism or non-parallel jobs, that might be only 2 to 1. But on the other hand, for tightly coupled stuff, you might only need a utilization of 10, 15% to be breaking even compared to going to the cloud. But the other, and this came out of going to an event at University of Kansas, oddly enough. They were doing, what was it? It was genomic diversity research computing stuff. And I was on a panel. By the way, it was the day before our event here. So, and I was on a panel, and sitting next to me was a KU bioscience faculty member, and she told a wonderful story about how she had introduced her students to one of the commercial clouds, and they loved it. They thought it was just totally awesome. They were very happy with it, and so was she, until she got the bill for $1,800 for the month. And she said, I don't have $1,800 a month. Now, the problem with that story, and it didn't occur to me in the moment as I was sitting there, but it occurred to me afterwards, what the French call the expression of the stare. It comes back to you, the thing you should have said, the comeback you should have made, comes to you as you're walking up the stairs later, right, to go to bed. But the spirit of the stare came to me, and it was, it's not the $1,800 a month that's the problem. It's that this month is $1,800, but next month it's going to be $3,600. And the month after that is going to be $72, because they're going to discover that if they submit a job, it goes like that. It's immediate, right? They don't wait around. It's on demand. And if enough people are doing it that they fill up all the stuff they got, they'll go out and buy more, right? There's no upper limit on how much you can get going over there, which is wonderful in the moment. But then if there's no upper limit, why would people stop? Well, okay. So as a faculty member, you could say to your grad students, all right, you get $1,800 a month with a bunch of you to spend. And when you run out of your $1,800, you're done. You get $800, make sure it lasts. You guys work out how you're going to split up the $1,800. Make sure it lasts, because if you use more than that, I'm going to have to lay one of you off. Right? We know, right? Because you're going to run out of money. There's no grant money, right? Okay. So you give them their $1,800. First, of course, they fight over who gets the $1,800 because each one of them wants to spend the full amount. But then they use it up in the first 2 weeks of the month, right? And then they go back to the faculty member and say, we used it all up, but we have a project, we have a paper due a week from now. We need more, right? Is the faculty member going to say, no, you can't publish that paper? Of course not. So no matter what you do, if the resources physically are effectively unlimited, which is the case in clouds, the commercial clouds, they'll keep buying more, right? It's like those little Doritos. It's very, very hard not to spend more and more money. And I know this because I'm just as guilty as anyone else. When I was my first year as an undergrad, the very first computer science course I took in college, back then it was metered and you were given an allotment per semester. And we were, I don't know, partway through the semester and I was working on a programming project and it was due the next day. And I finished out my allotment along about 4:30 in the afternoon. And I got into a panic because I couldn't get anything done. It kicked me out. So I called the professor at home during dinner. And he foolishly answered the phone, which as a faculty member, I remember this. And I tell my students, don't call me on the phone. But anyway, so he had to go, instead of finishing his dinner, he had to go to wherever it was because he couldn't do it from home back then, right? He had to go to wherever it was and get me an additional allotment so that I could finish out the semester. And I'm willing to bet I'm not the only one. And there was an upper limit to how much they could make available, right? Because there was one CPU for the entire university. So to me, that's one of the biggest challenges is if you've got plenty of money, it's a great idea. And if you don't, having no, admittedly, artificial constraint on the amount people can use means they'll use more and more all the time. And I think exponentially more. Yeah, Jeff.
So I also want to warn against the light at the end of the tunnel with cloud computing.
Okay, and scream that very loud.
Is the light at the end of the tunnel on cloud computing is probably a freight train coming down your way. So if you try to break loose from this particular vendor after you built your business practices around it, you're stuck. And my agency, I see that happening today with no thought about what's going to happen when contracts end and they have to shift over. So just keep that in mind. Pay now and pay later.
Yeah. Okay, good. More. What else did we learn today? What was exciting and new for you? Where did you go, oh! Did anybody have one of those moments today? Wow, nobody? All right, yes, Richard, what was your moment? Oh, the NSF information. Good, yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's always valuable information. Discussions about how to get money. So it turns out there is a money river that flows somewhere in an underground cavern. And it's very important to figure out how to get yourself a dipper and where to stand. Yes, Stan.
And an underground river flows through Henry.
Yeah. It really doesn't. But I will help you figure out where to dip your dipper to dip your little piece of stuff. I can't dip it for you, but if you've got a nice cup that you want to dip in the money river, I am happy to help you work on strategies for dipping the cup in the money river. Good, what else? And by the way, another plug for the Campus Champions. We, as Campus Champions, are happy to help, and we've helped other people to be successful in this stuff. And in fact, here within Oklahoma, within the One Oklahoma Cyber Infrastructure Initiative, see, I'm going to plug everything. Within OneOki, we actually do this in a very direct, explicit way because we have a weekly call anyway. So if someone's working on a proposal, everybody gives feedback. And a beautiful example of this is Buddy from University of Central Oklahoma. Guy on that proposal who has participated in the virtual residency. So he was on those calls and got a ton of feedback on the design of his proposal. And they got the money, and in fact, you guys were showing off pictures of when we did University of Central Oklahoma, which is a wonderful case study because it's not trivial although there is money set aside, it's not trivial for non-PhD granting institutions to do this. And in Oklahoma, our track record now is 2 non-PhD granting institutions have gotten MRI grants, and I'm gonna lowball the number and say 4 non-PhD granting institutions jointly got a campus cyber infrastructure grant, and that's from creating this culture of grant proposal writing within 1OD. We actually have a paper that we published about creating the culture of writing grant proposals. So if you'd like a copy of the paper, send me an email. I'm happy to point to it. It's from I think it was from Exceed 15 or 16. The last or next to last Exceed conference. Good more. I'm having fun.
So while writing proposals, what should you offering anything?
Did an activity from February of 17 to February of 18 that we called the Grant Proposal Writing Apprenticeship. And in that activity, we taught people to write grant proposals by writing a grant proposal. And I think I've mentioned this earlier, where, that's how I learned to write proposals. I didn't learn to write proposals, it's not like a manual. There's no training for any of this. Like, the funding agencies will send someone to your campus for a day to talk about how to write a proposal, and especially if you are at a research-intensive institution, it's probably the case that that happens like every year or two, and if it's not happening at your campus, it's somebody else in the state is hosting one or what have you. This is quite common. They love doing this. They're happy to do it. It's the fun part of what they do. It's not entirely paperwork what they're doing. That really won't get you that far along. So having the experience of participating in writing a proposal and listening to people who are writing the proposal think out loud, because that's how we did it. We wrote the proposal an hour at a time. Mostly it was every other week. As we got down toward the end, it became every week and finally 2 or 3 times a week. But we simply wrote the proposal by thinking out loud and asking each other questions as we went. So people learn stuff like, how do you imagine what the reviewers will say when they read this sentence, right? And that's not something that you can get from a seminar. That's not something you're going to get out of even a full day workshop. That's something that you have to participate in the process in order to understand how to think through these issues, right? This goes back to the strategic thinking, right? How do you think about how other people think? Because other people are making decisions and you want them to decide, let's face it, the right way. And you're going to help them decide the right way by giving them the best information in the most compelling way. Because if you give them the best information in a blah way, you don't get the money. You have to give them the best information in the most compelling way. A colleague of mine said, a grant program is a writing contest. The best writer wins. Good, more, this is fun. What did we learn? What was your excitement for the day? Yes?
Buses.
You need what?
Buses.
You need buses?
Yeah.
Put people on the bus? Yes, Dan.
We'll go round and round, round and round. Let's go.
Slow not helping. What do we got?
To be honest, if you have the incoming the bus.
God.
Yeah.
Okay, let's let go of the bus, shall we? But I do like the idea of a programming center. I do worry that the biggest barrier is going to be that, unlike with a writing center, so the people at the writing center, no matter what, they can't write your prose for you. They can help you, but they can't, because they don't know what you're trying to say, right? And the only way they're going to find out what you're trying to say is you write it down, right? And then they can help you craft it in wordsmith and all that. But at a programming center, the people at the programming center could write your programs. And the danger is that many of the people coming in for help at the programming center would just want you to write the code for them. Yes, Sandra?
No, but people maybe like a code review.
That would be very valuable. You need to clarify for people if that was what it was, though, because most people wouldn't know what that phrase means.
So the Software Sustainability Institute in the UK offers this.
Right.
They're quite successful with having online code reviews and giving tips and best practices.
That's great. Yeah, it would be fantastic to have something like that on each of our campuses.
Yeah, we've been thinking about, I've been trying to figure out how to implement a peer code review, so having people get together in group chat, so they review each other's code, so you can learn. I mean, having an expert coder review your code is helpful, but having your peers, both people get something out of it.
Right. Yes.
One of the things you have to do is look at the way you as the professor review a student's code that has problems and figure out what the most important facets of that are, and then do some training. We had an academic center of excellence that spent all of its money in a year instead of over 3 years, but they had, and I was still pretty much making the decisions for our undergraduate computer science program, and they sent an email to me and said, you know, we need you to recommend X students to come over here so that we can hire them to do this. And so I took all of the students and I sent an email and I said to the ones I wanted and said, okay, I'm going to recommend you for a job if you come to a couple of training sessions. And I dropped in on a regular basis. Just I could never talk to them or interrupted them or badgered them. I just dropped in so they could remember.
Okay, so now you're stuck with saying all of that again, because I'm in TV land, I couldn't hear very well.
I'm so sorry, TV Land, I forgot about you. We had an academic center of excellence, and they wanted to hire computer science students at like the junior level to help the younger students with their code. And luckily for them and for me, they sent me the email and asked if I could recommend students that they could hire. And I told them absolutely yes. And then I got the students together in a room and I said, okay, we're going to have these 3 training sessions. And if you come to them all, and if you come to believe and drink the Kool-Aid, I will recommend you for this job. And then I checked up and made sure they were doing it, because I don't believe that you ever touch a student's code. I believe that you walk the student through the steps until they understand which piece of logic has got them stumbling. And so that's how the Academic Center of Excellence get their code reviews.
Thanks. Okay, we had a couple comments from TV Land. Something I learned today was about how to grow and maintain a team of people. I've never been a supervisor, so I had never thought about it. I think that's a really good point. How many of you are supervising others? Okay.
Depends on who you ask.
Of course. In general. It's easy. Can you take a minute and talk about that? What's your strategy for keeping a team going well?
You find people that are passionate for what they do. Focus on developing that passion as much as possible. It doesn't always work out that way. There's always that 1-2% that doesn't work out. You have to develop those people, work with them for the most part, try to develop them, and work with their passion, what they enjoy. Usually it works out.
Nice. Okay. How about others? Any thoughts about that? Okay, that sounds like a big no. We're trying to be careful of students from CST courses coming in with homework codes, and our approach is similar to that in tutors. Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that reflects back to what Kathy was saying. Other comments? Fun things? Yes, Sandra. Oh, here, let me give you the mic.
Am I not loud enough? Really?
Nobody is. Unless you are screaming bloody murder, no one can hear you.
So yeah, with supervising, I mean, there are also a lot of nice stories. As Kathy already said, that if it's a difficult job, then have to do a good job. That's, that's the way it is. But there's a big difference between students and, for example, research programmers. We have a lot of research programmers at the center, and that they're senior research programmers, there is not much advising necessary because they know what they're doing. So it's not really, it's more like a role in the project, but not really advising at all anymore, more a collaboration than advising.
Thanks. Good. Other comments? I don't want to trip over these tables here. That's exactly the sort of thing I would do. I'm not the person who stepped in the hole that one time, but I could have been. Other comments? Okay, I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes of your life back.